measurement for ma bu. You should be able to get the thighs parallel to the ground, and in an orthodox one, you should be able to have the head straight up and down, tailbone straight up and down, like the Shaolin. Now you're going to see my body is going to turn into the barrel chest. So what I'm showing there is the difference between the orthodox and the unorthodox. So I'm going upwards into the normal orthodox posture and then barreling out. And that posture in the back happens all of the time, no matter what we're doing. All I'm doing here is demonstrating each one of the different stances. This is the drunkard or beggar offers the cups. So this is essentially a cat stance, right? But I'm rotating and turning. It kind of looks like Bagua in a way. The idea here is that it's not really a cat stance in the way people understand it, because that means people tend to just put all their weight in their back leg. I'm actually driving my front foot there down into the ground as I turn towards to look over it. Now here, I'm just demonstrating barrel techniques. So the drunken barrel is always omnipresent throughout all of the techniques, basically. No matter how you have your hands up, there's going to be a roundness to the back and the wrists. Basic kicks. So this is what I call a front kick. Basic, simple stuff, external. The second one is what people generally call a push kick. I call it a heel kick generally. And you can see one of the old names of this one's called Demon Puts on a Boot. You can kind of see it. I'm reaching out, grabbing something, and then pulling it on like I'm wearing a boot. The third one is the drunken shovel kick. So these are all three variants of the same thing, just a normal front kick. So the shovel kick's trying to come up and underneath and hit with the heel and an upward strike. And you snap the kick out kind of whenever it's most convenient, or you just fire it straight up into them and let your shin bone hit them however it might. So the snap kick is a straight out attack. The push kick, or demon puts on the boot, is to drag them into your leg, and then the shovel kick is to come up underneath their chin ideally. Hopefully you'll grab onto them. You'll see that in the first drunken point too. Basic footwork. So all I'm demonstrating here is stepping and turning. I'm going over top of my front knee into what's called an X stance, or Xiabu, twisted stance, and then manipulating from there and turning around, just getting my feet on the ground. This is a part of getting leg strength, but it's also a big part of starting to get what people understand of as root, which is more about finding your legs at first than anything else. Being able to feel what your legs are doing and how they press the ground when they make the move. So, from an orthodox perspective, there's my cat stance. Now I'm going to make the barrel on my chest and round out my back. So this is that barrel-chested drunkard thing. Notice that when I'm barreling out my chest, that my hips are actually tucking under and I'm pushing my front foot slightly towards the camera in this case. What that does is it ends up giving me a little bit of root. So this is one of the main exercises for Tanzhong. Tanzhong means center of the chest, or people refer to it as the middle dantian. What I'm doing is I'm working on different ways to throw elbow techniques by holding my heart and making, ideally, my hips not move. So I'm trying to keep my hips as still as I can while I just make my rib cage do all of the motion. In order to cultivate dantian, what that means is you need to be able to cultivate different origin points of movement in the body. So drunken, one of the reasons it's considered difficult is because it uses more than one. So to train Tanzhong, one of the easiest ways is to practice elbows. So what we're going to do is just a nice little exercise here. Harmonizing elbow. Okay, so I'm doing straight elbow, harmonizing elbow, spinning elbow for this one. So elbow techniques are generally the realm of one of the 80 morals or another. In particular, Zuiquan, he's the big wrestler. He likes to get in there and fight at that close range and use those things as strikes and throws. But it's also Lady He Xianpu. She's kind of pointy, and if you imagine that, you're fighting in close and you're being overpowered, right? That's the feminine side of this. Then the elbow makes a lot of sense as a weapon. So there's a couple different elbow techniques there. So from beggar offers cups to nailing elbow, this one's lifting elbow, and then the spinning sideways elbow. I'll teach in another video. There's an elbow set of techniques that this is a part of that I'm going to give everybody for Drunken. It's really good to get Tanzhong starting to work, as well as dantian, which means that the feet start to move underneath everything. Means you start to actually get footwork. This is the three canons. So the three canons is one of the first Qigong. There's 8 Qigong. What that is the most important movements in the style to train. So what I'm explaining here is that this is not a back fist the way people think of it. I'm thinking instead of pulling around my back. So my left shoulder, the one I'm throwing the punch with right now, is actually what's activating the back fist that comes before it. See? Yeah. Now, it's important to note that that front fist that's coming towards the camera is not moving in a straight line. If you punch in a straight line with a drunken cup fist, you break your fist. It's meant to go on an arc. Nothing in drunken moves straight. Nothing. So, as I turn and twist my body, that turn and twists the barrel. And if you notice on the uppercut, it's not really an uppercut. It's not straight up in the air, and it's not a hook either. It's sort of a two-dimensional curve in between the two, which is kind of where drunkard lives. Now, third canon is the most difficult one. Everybody has a hard time with it. You have to basically imagine that you've stretched your body all the way open, and it's twisted as far as it can be, like an elastic band being pulled as stretched as far as it can go. And once that elastic band's been stretched as far as it can go, it has to contract. And that's the part that throws the punch. So you can see I'm opening my left side of my body, and then my body stretches, there's the big stretch, and then to fire downwards means that my flank closes, my torso will turn one way or the other, and you'll see that there'll be a contraction. So in this case, I'm doing a contraction into my left flank. That's actually good. I'm glad I did that. That's a good way to see it. Okay, so first cannon, second cannon, the barrel, third cannon. Yeah, it does look okay. So here what I'm doing is I'm not putting emphasis on any of the striking moments. You don't have to emphasize the striking moments. Remember that Drunken is not supposed to be hard. It's a very soft martial art. When you see me do an exorcism of power, if you will, if I do power, then it's mainly because I'm demonstrating for somebody, or there's something that I need to practice that, like a joint needs work or something like that. It needs to have a little bit of force gone through it. And that's what Fajian is. But Fajian means expression of force. It means the force has to already be there in the first place, right? But we'll get to more of that. Okay, so this is just some basic kicks if we haven't done martial arts before. An outside crescent kick or a moon kick. This is a nice simple external variant of that baby right there. This is actually a whipping version of that kick. I was taught that when I was a young kid. Then there's a more sweeping version of the kick, which I was taught more by the Jing Wu. And there's outwards and inwards. These are obviously like in every Kung Fu system pretty much. The more of a snap you can get on that leg, the more power you're going to be able to whip through it for a whipping type of force. It's not just clubbing somebody with your leg. You should be able to take different kinds of force and run them through your legs however you want. Now, the side kick. Okay, so one of the Chinese names of the side kick that I learned was actually lazy tiger stretches its spine. And that made it make a lot more sense to me. So my rear heel, my bottom heel points at my target, and then you see that I'll stretch my spine out and then let it contract again. It's that simple. My spine opens and closes, or the front of my body opens and stretches out and then closes again. This way I can get the whole engagement of the torso rather than like that, an external style kick, or that kind of an external style kick, right? When I watch this one, my body will contract upon itself, yep, and then it'll open itself back up. In Drunken 1, that form right there where I'm spinning into the kick right there, that is called monkey climbs the tree. So what I did here was just an exercise that I've practiced with it. Basically a Fuzhugong Fa, something that is supplemental to practice a very specific kind of movement. So this is an opening and closing movement across the body diagonally. And you'll feel it. You should be able to feel it like a line go right out the heel that's kicking, and that same line extend all the way across your torso and out the opposing shoulder. I'm trying to exaggerate it here, so it's pretty easy to see. simple back kick. Not much to say about this, just basics. Always go into a crane before you kick, go into a crane after you kick, learn how to control yourself. And I mean, realistically, look behind you. Most often you'll see it as a spin, which is what I'm demonstrating here. But spin kicks, either you've already learned them, or it's another subject altogether. It just has to do with how
Thanks
you
for
spin
kicking
so
the
that your
face, baby.
body weight stays
Well
in the
done.
ground rather
That's
than
really cool.
standing up and coming up into your chest. This is a Qigong Fa. So of the 8 master techniques of Drunken, this is called the lotus stepping, okay? And the lotus stepping method is the entire system of stepping for the form, for the entire system. It's got all of the stances in tiny little transitions and a whole bunch of different expressions of force throughout the legs. So I'm trying to exaggerate it, and I try to do it with a little bit of flow here. But there's lots of different ways to break this down. Crescent kick, X stance, back to a bow stance, and then cat stance. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. I think I'll slow it down. There you go. As soon as you can see what my feet are doing here, you can see that I'm pulling my feet from place to place. Those are all foot sweeps. So essentially I'm throwing crescent kicks and side kicks along the ground, right? That'd be like a side kick, crescent kick, side kick, crescent kick coming across the body here for a throw. So this whole stepping thing, when you're practicing it, it shouldn't just be low in order to get some strength. It should actually be quite dynamic and lively. You should be pushing your feet at the ground and dragging them across as though you were pulling someone's ankle out from underneath them. Lotus stepping should be done both directions, doesn't matter. And the hands on top of it I haven't gotten to yet, but I do believe I videoed them here. Yeah. So this is known as tending the bar. And all this is different variants of circles, okay? So it looks like I'm stirring something like a big pot with a spoon. So there's all the different variants I demonstrate here. Coming inwards towards the body. This is an important variant, especially for Drunken, because it means you end up training power coming back towards yourself, which is pretty unusual. Power away from the body, right? So this is the back fist, things like that. And then you should be able to just change those up and interchange them. So now I've got both going a single direction. So they're both crossing my body. There's a back fist and kind of a blocking motion there, right? So this particular one where you're drawing this sort of circle, this is tending the bar. Now tending the bar is essentially your boxer's guards. So instead of just having your guards up above your face all the time, the idea in Drunken is that you're going to make them circle in that same space where your hands would normally go as a boxer. So instead of hiding your head behind your hands, you make your hands sort of float in front of your head. And then you would duck and move and whatever you need to if somebody attacked. So what I'm doing here in this drill now is just trying to get my hands to move and my feet to move. The most important part of the whole Ma system that I ever learned was if your hand moves, your foot moves. So if your whole body's not a part of what's going on, then it better be because of isolation training and not laziness. So now let's look at Drunken if it's shrunk a little bit. So this is that same exercise. This is the lotus stepping, but made into a taller, less kind of kung fu-y looking version, more like I'm ready to spar with somebody. Now, like I was saying, the tend the bar on the top becomes all your boxer guards and grabs and uppercuts and things. So this is very basic Drunken here. So what I'm doing is I'm moving inwards to force, and then I'm throwing an uppercut underneath it. So instead of backing away from force like that, I want to make sure that I'm always moving forward so that their force is actually transferring me into my turn. So it's actually going to get more power to the other side of my body, right? You can see why dantian becomes so important now, because if I get force on one of those arms, it should shoot the other arm around my back and towards the guy. That's what I'm hoping for. So all I did here was some various drills, just focusing on dantian. I put a little bit of leg work under it, but it might be too confusing at first. Just get very, very simple stuff. I did a couple of patterns. Ones that go upwards, upwards, uppercut. One that goes downwards, downwards, relax. Just basically pick a pattern in this idea and work for it. So you've got downwards and upwards. See the upwards ones there? Upwards is called offering wine, because you're offering it to your friend. Downwards is put your cups on the table, because you're basically pissed off and you're going to beat somebody up for it. So I block, try to hit them. They block, boom, they try to hit me. I try to hit them, I grab their arm. So this is just the difference between like the way boxing perhaps might think, and drunken boxing. So if this pool noodle is my dude's arm, because, you know, that's the way it is, he throws a punch at me, pool noodle attack, I block. The other arm comes at me, I block it. Now, when the third punch comes, I'm going to try, instead of punching him in the face, I'm going to put it underneath his elbow. So if I can get that under his elbow, I should be able to give his arm a little bit of a, well, a vent. In perfect world, it'll dislocate or something.
I'm going to get a hold of that arm.
And all I have to do in order to turn that elbow into dust is to turn back to normal really quickly. So I'm just turning, blocking, turning, blocking, looking at myself in the mirror. This is beauty looks in a mirror. And then here, just violently going back to center.
I turn back to center as though I was opening and looking at myself in the mirror. Should bust their elbow or they'll take a nice flight. Of the 80 mortals, this is Lady Huoxiangu, the most feminine of them all, and actually the hardest one for most people to do.
Okay, so drunkard or beggar offers his cups is the first movement there. This is an entry method. So this is like somebody puts up dukes and I'm walking in towards them and I'm putting up my dukes. Basically, we're about to confront one another, right? We're going to clash. But instead of just ramming into each other, we're going to use that momentum to power one arm underneath. So you should be able to see all of the different techniques I'm throwing in here. So my first thing is just a shield I'm blocking in behind, and then I'm throwing as much of my body as I possibly can through the momentum. So it's like I punch with my hand, elbow, shoulder, head, and then I'm withdrawing. And then I start adding, I think, elbows and stuff too. Yeah. So this is kind of the sloshing idea of drunken boxing. This is why it looks the way it does. Drunken's not like trying to throw a punch and hit somebody. It's more like throwing a bucket of water at someone and just wanting them to get wet. Like they're going to get wet. So if you look at these kinds of techniques, I'm throwing like 7 or 8 different elbows. I'm doing all kinds of stuff. But the idea is that I don't really think the first one's going to work. So if I put a little bit of attention into this, every one of these is powered, every one of these should be correct, and every one of these should be doing as much to my opponent as possible. But I don't really buy it, so I keep throwing one after another after another. Pretty much all Chinese martial arts work that way. There's not a whole lot of one punch, one kill ideas in martial arts. Now this is a really weird one. This is the ass attack.
So I reach out my fingertips as though I'm digging a trench into the ground. So if I'm reaching out to the camera, I'm not just going, hey, how's it going? I'm trying to pierce through the camera and get my attention there. So when I reach through my fingertips and I try to dig a trench in the ground, like my fingernails are growing longer, I'm going to let this extension outwards feel like it's digging into, like I have a big wall in front of me. I'm going to let it dig into that wall, but the wall's heavy. So if I'm going to get under the wall, I have to sink myself down in opposition to it because it's heavy, right? So my tailbone drops, my head rises as much as it can, my chest should stay sucked downwards, okay? My reach should go through my fingertips out the wall, and because it's so damn heavy, my tailbone sits to the earth. So when I do this movement, it looks like a horse stance, but it's not one. You notice that I am letting myself bend forward a little bit, right? I'm not making myself sit super straight. And that's because what I want is I want a backward energy to come out of it. I'm using my fingertips to solidify my stance enough so that when I'm here, I don't fall over because of that power. Reason I need that is I'm trying to extend backwards. You can't extend forward if you can't extend backwards, right? So what this is an ass attack. Someone's actually behind you, and you get wrestling, whatever, and you can almost just do it on a chair, but I'm in trouble, the guy's trying to choke me or whatever, but say his knee's right there. And I can feel that I can get his knee to have less weight on it for a second if I bump him with my hip. So the idea here is that I would drive my whole spine down through my tailbone, through my ass into that knee, right? So this is one of the drunken techniques that's very weird. So I'm reaching forward while reaching backward, and I'm reaching downward and outward through my ass there. So you end up in a bent forward horse stance, okay? It's very, very important, this one. Because it's inside all of the sets. Every time you sit down, it's in there, but I rarely teach it. So if somebody grabs you, it's like a bear hug maybe. You're driving in with your back. You get anything underneath you, you sit down into it with your ass. Okay? It's the back attack. Oh, back attack is from Zhong Lichuan. Zhong Lichuan? Yeah, Zhong Lichuan. He's the general. He's the fighter guy, wrestling guy. Kind of a mean guy. That's that.
So what is drunken boxing? What is the purpose of drunken boxing? And how does it work? So Zuiquan, drunken fist, is a system of northern martial arts, the one that I do. There's a southern system and a northern system. The northern one is Buddhist, that I also do. So there's a Buddhist and a Taoist system as well. So this Buddhist northern martial arts system is based on what people say is the imitation of movements of a drunkard. And that means like a drunken man falling around and sloshing all over the place, right? Being disgusting. However, it's not really an imitative style in the way that one thinks of Shaolin people maybe would put their hands in claws and try to move like tigers move. It's not trying to move like a tiger moves. It's trying to be a tiger. It's trying to think like a tiger thinks, right? So if that's the case, then what we've got to have happen is we've got to understand that drunken is an animal system. So it's the human animal that's drunk without inhibitions. That's really what's going on. So it's the whole idea of not knowing your own strength, not knowing, having too much bravado, too much confidence, liquid courage. That kind of feeling is what's going on when you're drunken. You just don't give a damn, right? In the stories of the 8 immortals, when they become drunk, some of them actually lose their tempers. These are like supposed to be immortal beings. Yeah, you know, that's how these things go. So drunken is a imitative style, but it's more a spiritually imitative style. You're imitating the spirit of the drunken person, the animalistic nature. What's the purpose? Well, the purpose of drunken boxing is to break any kind of previous orthodoxy you already have. So that's why it was taught and is usually a part of other bigger systems. You don't normally learn it until you're pretty advanced in a system, and it's just because you have to have a tower built before anybody can shake it. Otherwise, it'll just fall apart. So this is coming towards the whole idea of the yin-yang reversal of formlessness in martial arts. In order to become formless in martial arts, that means you have to have a form that you can let go of. So drunken is like a stage on the way there. It's like the bridge between external and internal kung fu. You take your external martial art and you soften it, and you start to kind of find the edges of where root and power and balance and things are. You kind of see what you can get away with. And that does show you the edges of your capabilities as a person, physically, mentally, and it'll show you the edges of the capabilities of your martial art as well as your drunken boxing. Drunken kind of ends up being the thing that glues things together. It seeps into the cracks of other things because it gives you a new perspective, a new lens on how you look at everything. So that's its purpose. Its purpose is to destroy the martial arts you already know in order so that you can have a new way to look at things and rebuild them better than they were in the first place. How does drunken work? Well, drunken boxing, as far as a combat art, has a very different attitude towards what combat's about. So I have a theory. This is kind of the way I see martial arts when it comes to combat. There's 3 spheres. The first sphere is your personal body space. And all martial arts tend to work on their own personal body space and mastering it so that nobody can mess with it, right? The second sphere is the other person, the opponent's personal body space, who of course has also trained martial arts and doesn't want anybody to mess with their sphere. The third one is the sphere that connects the two of you in the combat, the space in between you. Now, if you win 2 out of those 3 spheres, if you start to control how they move, you win. If you win 3 out of 3, it's a landslide. Most martial arts strategically focus on 2 out of the 3 though, okay? And usually it's first and foremost their own sphere, so that their body's under their control. And then the second one is usually how to control the combative bridging sphere. And then maybe the third one will be the opponent's sphere. Whereas some arts will actually pay less attention to the bridging sphere and pay more attention to the opponent's sphere. Something like Tai Chi, right? Kind of takes for granted that you end up touching. And then once you've trained enough Tai Chi, you realize that you can take their sphere away as long as you maintain yours. You win 2 out of 3. Drunken, Zuiquan, has a completely different mindset about this. So what it does is it trains its body in order to be able to handle giving up its own sphere to the opponent. So it's trying to control the opponent's sphere and make the opponent do things it wants. And and take advantage of everything the opponent does. And it wants to maintain control of the sphere in between itself and the opponent. So it's working on making sure that blocks are going where they're supposed to go. You know, if I want him to pick his arm up, I'm going to threaten a particular area or whatever. And then the third sphere, its own body, it's willing to give up. So if I'm doing Drunken and I'm fighting somebody who's like a throwing person, right? Shui Jiao or Judo or whatever, the best Drunken boxing I could do would be to get thrown around and then take as much advantage of them as I possibly could while I was falling all over the place. So rather than fighting them, yang versus yang, double heavy, if the Judo person wants to throw me, it's totally cool. I like being thrown. I've been thrown lots of times. No problem to fall down. But I'm going to grab one of your ears while we do it. And I'm going to tear it off with me as a part of my break fall. I'm sorry. And that's kind of the attitude Drunken has, right? It's always willing to give up itself because it's out of control. It's drunk. But at the same time, it's going to take advantage of every tiny little bit that it can possibly do in the other two spheres all of the time. Drunken is like, not like throwing a rock through a fan. It's like throwing a bucket of water through a screen door. That's how you attack with Drunken. That's how Drunken works. You don't care where they get hit or how they get hit. You just care that they do get hit. And it has to have a certain sense of selflessness in order to get there. Anyway, so hopefully that answers those first three questions. What is it? What's really the purpose of it, and how does it work? I hope you enjoy the vids. Where you put herbs. Inside those ovens is where you cook the pill of immortality. Okay? So the dantian is the field where the pill of immortality is cooked. Right? It's where that nourishment happens. Right? It's part of the grain path. Because the grain path is grain comes in here and out there. Right? It's all a part of this thing. So dantian, where did dantian come from? Well, let's go way back. Like way back. Like caveman back. All I know is sometimes I feel bad here. And if I grab a sandwich and I put it here, I feel better. And I've got a whole bunch of energy for a while. Still I want another sandwich here because this feels better. I get energy from the food I eat because it goes to this energy storage spot inside me I don't understand. And eventually the energy of the sandwich is gone, so I need another sandwich. Funny enough, it works with air too. Air, you need that a lot more often than sandwiches. Same thing with water. That's why the Chinese have that saying, right? What is it? 30 days without food, 7 days without water, not 1 second without qi. You can't live for a second without a relationship of some kind, right? So dantian became the cultivation spot of everything that keeps you alive. Fast forward a whole bunch of generations. You start having weirdos learning how to breathe, like trees and frogs and turtles, because they're trying to figure out why they don't live the same way. So the Buddhists, they find this way of breathing that calms them way down. If you're meditating and the monkey mind is bothering you, that Buddhist breath, like this, with that ratio, will help you a lot, because it just drops your anxiety and lets you kind of focus yourself. Taoist breath, they started trying the exact opposite, because if you watch some animals, they breathe like that. We do too. You know when? You're scared. The second you're scared, your fight or flight goes off, you switch into Taoist breath, because your nervous system activates and you wake up. So what happens is Taoists figured it out, that they can just make that happen when they breathe. I can change how I feel inside by how I breathe. They came up with this crazy, unbelievable cosmology.
This is inside your body. So you've got, and that's it. Try to touch my chest. I'll try to touch your chest. Now feel, try to touch my chest. I can do that, or I'm pushing your hand out of the way. External. Drunken boxing, I'll just get out of the way. If you really want your hand dirty, that's not up to me. It's fine. I'm just not standing in front of it. Right? So do the same. Here I come. Just turn. That's what Bhagwa feels like too. No matter what comes at you, he's gonna end up turning you. Eventually, if my foot moves. Teach me, if I tighten down here just a little, sink just a little, put my nose just a little towards him, I start to feel really heavy. Now a whole bunch of my body weight's there, so it's really not that big a deal. See what my body's doing? I'm not doing anything with my arm. If you watch my arm,
It's just
it's motionless. There is no circle. It's back here. What that does is it breathes power in your forearms. So that when you do this entry, put your dukes up. When I'm doing this entry, it's not a little trick. I'm tiger boxing, so I'm trying to pull him into me to eat. So I'm pulling his body down into what I'm doing. Breathe in. Look to your left. Reach and project out of your left fingertips as far as you can go until you can't reach any further without losing the intention. And when you reach that extent, start to pull it back in through the fingertips, back into dantian. Then we look to the right. We project from our dantian out through our right fingertips as far as they'll go. Pull it back. Turn to our right, looking ahead of us. Reach through our left fingertips, projecting as far out as we can go. Pull back. Turn. Reach, project. Pull back in. Turn forward. Left hand points up, palm in. Right hand points down. Look up without moving the neck and project up through your left fingertips. Pull back in. Switch hands. Reach up with the right fingertips. Pull back in. Breathe in. Project to the extent of your palm, from heel to palm. Shine the flashlights on your brain.
Yeah, point them right at your temples.
breathing sink to dantian. Observe your abdomen. And relax.
Good partner, he'll do the same move if he can remember. Until I can get it over with. Figure out what I'm supposed to do. And really, like we're supposed to be a big martial arts family. It's in his best interest for me to not get beat up too. So if I can't figure it out, he might start giving me advice, even though he's the one kicking my ass. Right? Because that's the idea, is we're only as strong as our weakest link anyway. So you can't think of it as, I gotta beat this guy. Think of it as it's just a lab. See how slowly and gently you can push each other over. Because if you can push each other over with like 2 pounds of force, I mean, when you hit someone, they're gonna fly. You just need to know where to put the force, right? So take it a little slower. Disadvantageous position right here. If you look, his sword is between my sword and him. Even if I tried to go up, he just lifts the sword. See, there's a barrier. But if you look at where he is on me, my sword's not in position. So this is where the drill comes from. So he has gotten past me, and he's going to try to carve my leg out from underneath. So we're going to take a step back with our back leg, and then I'm going to pull my front leg back and let it pass. And now we've reversed the position. So obviously I'm going to try to chop him. So I step forward, and he steps forward. Real slow. Real slow. Eventually, you start trying to cut each other. Once you get a bit of a feel here. Because what's great about this exercise is it's binary. As soon as you try to cut each other, you can't be like, well, if we were going really fast, I would have blocked it, I would have punched you harder. No, you got cut with a sword you didn't. Conk. Oh, oops, yeah, I should have done that before.